Hi, everyone. Welcome to special time for our Tuesday LinkedIn Lives. And thank you very much, Virginia Franco, for joining me once again. Virginia and I, we first met many years ago on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
And one thing, we just stayed in touch through networking, which is really
yeah,
what it's all about. And I'm happy to call her what I consider a networking friend. I mean, I kind of
right.
think that it's more than that, just a networking connection. And we were talking before the call about the changes now with the economy and all the layoffs, and to some extent even how people are going about it differently. Now, just as background, we called this Lions and Tigers and Resume um, way back when we were on Clubhouse, and the joke was we were talking about a theme for the show. And I thought Wizard of Oz, Lions and Tigers and Resumes, oh my. It just sounded like a very catchy thing because we
Yes,
figured we
because
were
we
talking
couldn't think
about
of
it.
anything. We were
No, we couldn't think
struggling.
of anything. And
Yeah,
so I'm not a marketing person per se, but it just seemed like a wonderful thing. So, Virginia, myself, and Claire Davis, we had this conversation on Clubhouse. We've had it here once. Claire couldn't make it today, but hopefully she will join us again soon. I see already we have Dan Roth here, and yes,
yeah.
you do
No,
have to
I'm
make me
gonna
a
keep it
custom.
PG.
So what's the double finger mean
So
anyway?
Dan Roth at on Friday's live stream with Sonal Ball. I was talking. He was answering a question about his thoughts on age discrimination. I want to say, and he
Uh-huh.
gave the double finger in this, and then we screenshotted it, and I've got it meme ready to go whenever he's ready. So
So what do
I
you?
won't do that though.
Oh, no. Okay. So what do you find are some of the challenges now? You mentioned, you had started doing this in 2008, started your business then. I've kind of started what I did after the pandemic started.
Mhm.
So do you see any similarities between then and now, or is it kind of the same thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's certainly the last few years of the pandemic reminds me of what I saw when I've written resumes since the 20th century, but I got really into it in '08 when everything exploded with the financial crisis. But I saw people pivoting out of necessity and people saying, you know what, things really suck, so let me figure out what it is that I love and what works with me. So just a lot of soul searching.
Mhm.
Um, But I also, in terms of the job seekers that were coming to me, I was seeing a lot of people preparing in case they lost their jobs and or saying, I have lost my job. I know what I love to do and what I want to do, but I'm gonna have to settle because I've got some bills to pay. Um, and with layoffs that are happening, I do feel, right now it's very tech heavy. So
Mhm.
I'm not seeing industry wide, but I'm curious to see if that mentality prevails or if hopefully this is more of a softer recession than what we had in '08. I think '08 was one for the books. So I'm hoping it does not happen to that extent.
I hope everyone here who's on the call will just sign in and let us know where you're calling from if you have any other questions. This is the way I kind of see it. I remember 1999, 2000, there was the whole internet bubble. Everything was really going crazy with the internet. Then all of a sudden, all heck broke loose. And, um, then coupling that with 9/11, things that took a while to rebound. And the people that are reaching out to me now are people that don't necessarily they really didn't see it coming, and a lot of them just went to startups. And I think this is a more of a startup type layoff, top heavy thing. And when I look at their resumes, the first thing I say to myself is, what do you want to do? I mean, it's just so list specific, resume ish. And I know you want to be delicate and you want to be diplomatic with people, but at the same time, you want to help them get a job and support them. So that's kind of a balance for me. I mean, my main focus is LinkedIn, but how do you tell someone in a very diplomatic way that they need to kind of change it up a little bit?
For me, I am because I focus on the writing piece, I write their career marketing collateral, which means I write their resumes, I write their LinkedIn's. Having a target and being clear on what that is informs everything. If your documents leave people questioning what it is you can do and how you can add value,
Hmm.
if no, sorry, let me back up. Nobody is going to spend the time combing through your resume to try to figure it out. So you've got to spell it out for them. And so I'm really clear on, if you don't have a target, it will show. And you have got to make sure that what you present about yourself resonates with people that are hiring, who are looking at hundreds of candidates like you, and they appreciate it being crystal clear, and that have, and that the dots are connected. So while I don't do this, I have a roster of people that I send them to, where to help them figure out what they like, sort of what is at that intersection of what they like to do, what they're good at, and then what they can make money doing, because it needs to be sort of
Right.
all three.
I think there's a sense also that people have a hard time talking about themselves and putting themselves out there, especially on LinkedIn. You're marketing yourself and you're a salesperson. And I'll have a conversation with them, kind of like you and I are having a conversation. And I'm like, why isn't this on your LinkedIn profile? What good is it
Yeah,
just to tell
a lot.
me instead of everyone else?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's really hard to write about yourself, especially once you have been, and speak about yourself, especially if you have been out in the workforce for a while and your career story is, up and downish,
Mhm.
nonlinear. So talking to somebody else who, and having them hear your story can really it can be beneficial to help you um, include stuff that you've missed, because you're too close to it otherwise.
What do you think about the idea? I push for like having an accountability group or a bunch of people that can
Mhm.
help and support each other out. Because now, especially, it, everyone has different strengths and weaknesses, and you want to have people really be able to keep you accountable and support you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, job search is hard. It can be really lonely. And what has been great about the pandemic is the rise in virtual job search support groups like what you offer, Kenneth. And if you're not a group person, having one person that can pick you up when you're down, celebrate with you when things are going well, and keep you doing what you say you're going to do. I had an accountability partner when I was, launching my business. We spoke monthly for years, and I counted on her to say, well, what about that thing you said you were going to do? And it's, it's like having a mom that bosses you around. I think it's great.
Well, I think it's also, like you said, it's such an alone thing to go and job search. And
Mhm.
you're going to have your ups and downs. But I think to some extent, and this is, I agree, Lynn, job search is a team sport.
Yeah.
And you really can't go it alone. But I think also you need people to tell you very nicely how you can improve yourself. I love the idea of peer interviewing. We talk a lot about that. If you can have someone interview, like if we're going to interview each other, it's just helpful to know, because you don't realize what you don't know. Even if it's something like just smiling. I think I posted about that on Jack Kelly's thing. You gotta smile. You gotta really show that you're excited and interested, not just assume that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's so many things that when we are nervous, we don't notice on
Mhm.
camera and in person, from filler words like and like, which those are my killers, to hand gestures and all of that, that even if you don't have time to do a face to face, you can record yourself and you can send it to someone else. But having a third party or second party perspective is so valuable, and it needs to be someone, I think, that is not your spouse, or somebody that you could get in a fight with if you don't if you
Well,
don't
and,
like
and,
the
and that's
feedback.
true
So
though. Sometimes it's also, and I've said this before, when you talk to people, there's different types of explaining what you do. I'm in IT. I can throw buzzwords left and right at another IT person, and we will get
mhm.
it. But if I'm going to tell you, if you're not in IT, what I do, and I throw IT stuff, no one's going to be able to help me. So you really got to have that message in such a way that people understand enough about what you do that they can help you.
No, that's a really good point. And I know that when I'm writing documents, I really try to remember that there are those two audiences. You need to explain what you do to someone who's maybe more of a junior level recruiter who, can't program, doesn't know all those details, but understands the high level impact that you're supposed to be making. But then you also need to appeal to that person who is, that super technical person. You need to show that you have the chops for that. And there's ways to, balance that line or straddle that line.
I also, and this is something I had learned from Jack and from Dan Roth, just because you have the soft skills, you have to have some level of the technical specialties. You can't just wing it and assume. You have to have the bare minimum, whatever that is. I mean,
Yeah.
just because you think you can pick something up, there's a risk involved from the hiring manager standpoint. They don't want to make the wrong decision because let's say you don't get the job, you can get upset and move on. But let's say they hire you and it doesn't work out and you leave or something, they're on the hook for what happened. So sometimes I think to some extent they may be overly cautious, but it's just something to think about. They don't want to make the wrong decision because of how it impacts the company. And recruiters are caught between a rock and a hard place, I think, many times when it comes to that.
No, absolutely. I mean, and the companies are the ones paying their bills. From a recruiter standpoint, it behooves us to be crystal clear on how our skills align with the target. So because you're making the recruiter's job easier, and you're allowing them to present your case to the hiring manager as to why you're a good candidate. But it
So
does make for career changers that it's an added challenge.
yeah, I agree. So, what are some of the main things that you see in terms of, I don't want to say mistakes, but things that people do on resumes that they probably shouldn't, or or maybe it's advice that they've gotten over the years that maybe isn't relevant anymore?
So the couple things that I see that are missing, a lot of times people skip having two sections that I think are really valuable when well written. I'll back up by saying, and I said this before, that reading a resume and really LinkedIn profiles it's sort of the same way we read the news when we're in a rush. So thinking about how you get your news, whether it's on Twitter or a news site, you look at headlines. And if the headline grabs you, you read that first paragraph to tell you what the story is going to be about and hook you to want to read more. Those two sections in resumes and LinkedIn can do the same thing. So by skipping a headline that says, I'm a financial services, IT project manager, or I'm a chef or an astronaut, that then by not having it, you're forcing the reader to sort of jump down and try to figure it out. The summary paragraph that follows, what I see a lot of are people that use that paragraph to describe themselves with really powerful adjectives, and then they might throw in some industry buzzwords. And honestly, that approach worked great 8, 10 years ago, and what happened is it stopped working great because everyone started using those same adjectives and they lost their value. So what I have found effective when I'm writing that paragraph is to weave in some strengths and traits of yours based on a discussion with an accountability partner, for instance, but then go to the job boards, go to job postings and see what they're looking for. Weave that in, but instead of adjectives, replace adjectives with little bits of information that are unique to your story. Because what you're doing with that is you're letting the reader walk away with a sense of what you're targeting, how you're a good fit, and then they know a couple things about you without ever really even diving into the resume. Um, the other things that I see people doing are that they just talk about their responsibilities versus what was the impact that they made in the role. So I always tell people it doesn't matter what you did day in and day out. Think back to what you were brought on to do. And if you walk away tomorrow and reflect back, where did you leave your mark? And then let's go about quantifying that. And usually you end up with 4 or 5 bullets that really imply what you did day in and day out, but they show a result, and results are really memorable. The last thing that is I harp on quite a bit is people write as if someone is printing out their resume. Resumes do get printed out, but it usually doesn't happen right away. Usually people are looking on their mobile devices or on their laptops, and screen reading is a whole different ballgame. We don't read online as easily as we do in print.
Hmm.
We can't absorb dense text. It makes our eyes glaze over, and we're all ADD online. We jump all over the place. So you've got to keep your paragraphs to 2 to 3 lines. You need to add space in between every bullet or paragraph you write. Um, and because we know people jump around, when you're writing a sentence, put the good stuff at the beginning because there's a chance the reader won't ever get to the end.
So
So, yeah.
I get two things all the time. One of them is, do I put down the years for my graduation on there? And because I don't want to date myself as age. And then the other question I get is how far back in my resume should I go with the chronology? In other words, I've been working 25, 30 years. I'm not going to put 25 or 30 years worth of stuff on there. But what's the guideline now? And I'd be curious to know your thoughts on both.
Yeah, so it's really, really hard to completely blow off blood, sweat, and tears that you did just because it is before a certain date.
Hmm.
So what I always do when I'm hearing someone's story is you know, I think about I ask about the stuff that happened pre 15 years ago. So what is that like or was that 2008 right now? 2007? I can't do math.
Um,
So it's 6 to 8-ish.
6 data. So that
um
takes you back to 2014 now, if you will, something like that. Yeah.
No,
Is it
so I'll go back 15 years. So
okay?
that's, yeah.
2007. Okay.
So depending on your target, if there are roles that you had prior to 2006, 2008 that are relevant to your target, I want to hear what it is about that role that's relevant to what you
Hmm.
do today. And then I'm not afraid to include it. But what I'll do is I'll include an earlier experience section where I do a high level synopsis of that role. Sometimes the value is just that you work with this really amazing company or that you held a certain role. But I hear that story, I include what's relevant and I remove the dates from it in the resume. And then if it's super relevant, I'll reference it in that summary at the very top. LinkedIn is a little different for me, and I think my take on it, I'm not sure that everyone agrees with, but my feeling with LinkedIn is that when someone is intrigued enough to click on your experience and start, scrolling down, you've sort of overcome that age bias concern. And so if you did something that was very, very relevant, I would prefer to reference it than not on LinkedIn, because with LinkedIn you can't remove dates. You've got to include it if you want it
Hmm.
to be seen. So that's sort of my take on how I approach that with both documents. But it's got to be relevant. That's the key. If you scooped ice cream at Baskin Robbins and you're targeting, I don't know, an IT software engineering role, probably not relevant. Doesn't need to go on there.
See, I have my things are a little different, but it's
Yeah.
complementary. First of all, I see resumes still from people that have their addresses on there. And that goes back to a time when you would mail resumes in the mail. You really don't need more, I don't believe, than your phone, maybe a general location. Again, that depends. And then even the
City,
idea,
state, and zip.
right, right. And then even the idea, and again, this is perception. You got to have an email address that is not Yahoo or AOL or anything like that. Again, this is just me being, and it's still the same. And then by the same token, if you don't put your LinkedIn, you don't put your email address in your about section of LinkedIn, how do you know for sure? You want to give people every opportunity to connect with you. And Don brings up a point which I can relate to. I remember when I was at UPS, I was there 9 years or so, and what I did there is I broke up that time by certain job titles within time.
Yep.
So I wasn't there. I would break it down. I did this for 3 years, that for 2 years within the same company. And I think LinkedIn still allows you to do that. Is that something from a resume standpoint that you might recommend too? Or is it just going to come, or is you just kind of do what's there?
So if you've been with the company for 25 years, what I'll do is I'll say, I don't know, IBM, I'll say 2000, and then I'll list dates 2018, 2008 to present, and I'll list all those roles. And if there were earlier roles, I'll put them under the earlier experience section, and then I'll still say IBM did this role, but I removed the dates from it. But again, it's only what's relevant. The, if those earlier roles are relevant, you include it. If not, it doesn't matter how long you've been with IBM. If someone calls, if someone is calling IBM for reference, they'll list earlier dates, but you're not. This is not your blueprint. This is your brochure. So it's okay to not include that stuff. Again, it's all depends on the relevancy.
Yeah, I think also thinking about, I mean, there used to be this whole discussion about color SMAs versus black and white. Maybe it's industry specific, but I think about it from a job seeker perspective. I'm going to email you my resume. You may look at it very quickly. You may put it in a database, and that may be as far as it goes. You know, what's the chance you want to stand out? And I think it's so important to have whether is have something in the introduction, have people go to a place where they can learn more about you than just applying with just a an email. But again, that brings up another thing. What do you think about a cover letter?
So I have some thoughts on the age discrimination stuff
Okay,
that I want to address, but
sure.
also on the cover letter. To me, and I know a lot of people disagree with this, there isn't a real downside to writing them. My sense is just through anecdotal research that they get pitched maybe a third of the time. So you run that risk, but when they do get read, they could make a difference. So if you can write a well-written one that addresses potential red flags or really adds some additional value, then you could make a big difference. If you're applying online and it asks for one, you better include it though.
Hmm.
But a lot of what you were saying around what email you pick, whether you use color or whether when just listing your city, state, and zip versus your full address, when dealing with age discrimination, the I always think about what the biases are for that generation. And for Gen Xers and I guess baby boomers, the biases are that we are not current on tech and that we are slow to change and that we don't play well with others, that we are the smartest people in the room. So some small things you can do to sort of overcome those biases are present, use current practices or modern practices with your resume. Have a Gmail versus an AOL. um, Use a bit of color where it makes sense. In terms of addressing the thought that we don't play well with others, you use words like collaborate and partner and show that in your resume. um, if you're current on certain technology that's really relevant to your job, you list it. So it's all about those biases. If someone is a Gen Zer, there's a whole nother set of biases. And so you write to overcome those.
So I'm going to post a few questions here that are comments. Sam Cohn, the Twitter handle is a valuable way to communicate. Any thoughts about Twitter in terms of reaching out to recruiters or companies?
I told Kenneth before we jumped on that my son is looking, and he's in a space where there's a ton of people that are on Twitter. He's into that web 3.0 blah, 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 that I don't always understand, but he's actually networking through Twitter. So if your people are on there, then yeah, use it as an opportunity. But if you're going to put your Twitter handle on your LinkedIn or your resume, make sure that what you're posting aligns with your brand and that it's current. I see so many people included on LinkedIn and then they haven't posted a thing since 2016, or it's all about something that has really nothing to do with their job targets.
So Nigel Willis, does only including relevant experience ever create timeline gaps?
Not if it's before 2008, because we've removed the dates and it doesn't, then you don't know when it happens. There is no issue around gaps.
And I don't know who this person is because I guess they have their. It says a manager once said to me, "I
Mhm.
may not read the cover letter, but I go for the applications that have a cover letter first." And I think
Interesting. Yeah.
when I was actually hiring people, um, I would I would actually, besides looking at the resumes, I would look at the LinkedIn profile, but I was interested in knowing more about them than just what they had on paper. You know, I think that's why when you go to LinkedIn, you see what they're doing to engage. Um, Nowadays, I think also, and this brings up with the time between people going back to work and COVID and all that, how do you feel people should account for the time? I mean, is it okay to list the volunteer experience as a job? Is it, I mean, how do you, I mean, LinkedIn has this whole thing where not the open to work, but the thing where you can have the job gap, and they actually
Yeah. Yeah.
create that
Yeah.
for you. So I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Oh, and really quickly back to the cover letter
Yeah, sure.
comment. His point, he makes my point completely. Some people love cover letters, some people hate them, and you don't know who you're dealing with. So if you don't mind putting in some sweat and tears to write it could make a difference. But just know it might get
Sure.
pitched. To answer the COVID and the gaps questions, I do feel like the last 2 years people have shown more grace than they would otherwise with gaps. But I always My answer is it depends on what you've been doing. If you were able to upskill, or you went in a different direction, or you did free work helping friends, and there's things that I might include. I never want to, you never want to lie as to what you did, but you want to use what you did and help to put yourself in the best light. Some of those categories on LinkedIn, like stay-at-home mom, or caregiver and all of that, it depends on how long you did it, whether, and it depends on the audience that I'm targeting. Some older school industries might not embrace that as much as others. So I think about my audience when I'm writing, and you know, deciding what I choose to include on LinkedIn.
I mean, I would also say if you've been taking training, taking classes, doing something, that's just as relevant. One of the things I was just thinking about that on your resume. We talk about our education for sure. What would you think about a separate section or a subsection about learnings or training as listed on the resume too, or is that something that would all be considered under education?
Well, no, because LinkedIn has a certification section as well, but it shows the education section is more prominent on LinkedIn. So if there is an educate some a certification that you did that's really relevant to your job target, then I would include it in your education. So if you're targeting like a brand marketing role, and you are certified in, Google Analytics and all those, all that stuff, then
Right.
that's pretty relevant. So I would include it. I was thinking about a client during the pandemic that was off for about a year, but he decided to use the time to get his PMP, and he'd been a project manager forever, but he was finally getting the certification.
Mhm.
I created a job for him on LinkedIn, and I called him a PMP candidate. And then I talked about how he used the time during COVID to up his skills, and showed where he was, and just talked a little bit about what he'd done during the pandemic. So that's an example of showing the gap.
Right.
But I wrote a title that the job title that I created, it was also keyword searchable. I knew that PMP was
Right.
something that people would search under on LinkedIn.
And this is the same thing too. If you have certificates from Google, Facebook, or HubSpot, definitely include them. Would you consider adding those on a resume though as well? Um,
Depends on
like
your target.
like for example, like you could have an area, call it training and things, and if it's relevant to your job, put it on there because again, they only know what they know, and that's probably more
Yeah,
relevant.
I've taken a bunch of courses in resume writing best practices that aren't a certification, but they're listed in my education because they're relevant to what I want people to find me for.
So this is Dr. Scott Dell. I don't. He teaches, I believe, in South Carolina, and any thoughts to having multiple resumes, one for distribution, one to go for the ATS for the same type of position? That's a whole discussion about how many resumes we need and for what.
Yeah, so I like to write one document that's designed for people and for bot for the ATS. There's a big misnomer that ATS will kick your resume out, and that's not the case. But what it can do is sometimes, depending on the system, it might not give you proper credit for things. So there are, and I could find the blog and I can share it with you, kind of
Sure.
to share. But there's ways that you can write one that works for both.
I think the Mr. Lynn Williams knows ATS is back.
Yeah,
But I would
whatever Lynn
say
says.
the ATS is a system, and it's really up to how it's being programmed and used by the company. And
Well,
every
yeah, it's a
company
filing system.
get
Exactly.
right. So, I mean, ideally, sometimes you have to apply online, but that's not how you're going to get most of your jobs. It's going to be through networking and engaging, for sure. And I think what we're talking about is very general, but I mean, and there's
That's
very
right.
specific things for sure.
That's right. And but a lot of recruiters, I mean, there's a lot of recruiters on Twitter that are very passionate about this. And then they also share their thoughts on LinkedIn. Just because they use ATS to file their stuff doesn't mean that they don't go in and personally review the resumes. So that's why I like to write one document that the ATS will score and parse correctly, but the human being behind the machine will look at and be able to read it clearly.
And I know one thing we talked about right before the call is now that all these companies are laying off people, people have no problem sharing that they're looking for an opportunity or
Yeah.
job there and self promoting, which is something that I was told not to do a while ago, or maybe it was just not done. I don't think there's anything wrong with that for sure. But I
To
think
me, that's a silver lining of social media that I have not been laid off before because I went on my own in 2008, so I haven't had the chance to be fired in a while. But my husband was lost his job during the recession, and he talked about it amongst his network, but you didn't put it out for beyond that. And so the chance to reach audiences is much greater. What I love seeing on LinkedIn are the people that say, I got laid off, but this is what I offer.
Hmm.
Um, because the more clear you are on what kind of roles you're a good fit for, the more people can run off and try to help you.
Absolutely. And I think there's a bunch of resources out there. We've all tried to put them together. Um, Networking events, very important to go to them. And in the beginning, you may go with a different mindset than later on. But I would just say, think about how often you go out and how you do your job search, because there's a lot of misnomers out there. Some weeks you're going to be doing a lot more than other weeks, and it may be a different type of schedule as to what you're doing in terms of job search or resume or whatever. It's not like it's not like an 40-hour a week job per se. You may do different things on
Yeah.
different days.
So it's my husband has landed 2 jobs since the pandemic, and he hates the big group networking. It gives him hives. So what he has done is he will come up with 5 people that he feels like could help him spread the word powerfully. And every time he would have conversations with them, but every time he finished up a conversation, he would say, what are names of 3 other people that you think I should speak with? And those conversations enabled him to not have to get into a big room and have discussions. And, he really couldn't during the pandemic, but even if he could, he didn't like them. And knock on wood, they have worked. He has landed more quickly each and every time.
So, um, what if I don't have anything special to write about in my resume? And everyone has something special to write about, I think. But I've been doing an administrative job for more than 10 years and need to find a job again. I would, as a starting point,
There's
think what are the accomplishments or achievements
there's
that
always something special. I don't know if you're an executive assistant, but you said administrative, and that's what came to mind. Um, Executive assistants manage super confidential topics, and they help to advance their executive strategy. And so think about the part you played in a company's growth by helping the person that you work for to advance. Maybe you made a process take less time. Um, Maybe you made people much happier that otherwise would have quit. Maybe before you got there, tons of people were jumping ship and now they've stayed put. So think about what things were like when you started and what things are like now, and how you've improved or stopped them from getting worse or things like that. And that's where the special stuff comes in.
I would also ask some of your friends and family for some, because what you may think isn't special, they're going to point out to you from things over the years. I think sometimes we kind of shrug off what we've done as not being a big deal because we're working and it's just going through what we do. So I think sometimes that would be helpful too. I think for sure.
Yeah. That everyone has a role to play in a bigger picture, and recognizing what that is valuable.
So part of this, and you alluded to it before with your husband, I am an introvert. I used to hate going to sessions with 60 or 70 people and having to put my tell me about yourself or hi, how are you? I'd be that that person at the fly on the wall that just wants to get out of there. So, for people that are just getting started doing networking, whether it's a one-on-one conversation or something like this, are there any suggestions you kind of have to help them kind of get back in the swing of things?
So I shared the advice to avoid big crowds altogether, but oh my gosh, now I'm spacing on his name. It'll come to me. But Greg Roche,
Okay.
he speaks quite a bit on the topic of networking. And a piece of advice that he shared with me that I loved was, if you're in a room, look for groups of 3 and join those, because greater than 3, then it's really hard to find your voice, and less than 3, you might be interrupting some sort of a confidential conversation. And so when he said 3 is that perfect number, it's not too intimidating, and it is an easy way to get it in. So that, um, plagiarizing his advice, that's what I'm sharing.
I remember the first time I went, I took a friend with me, someone I knew,
Mhm.
someone we could talk to about anything. And then when
Yeah,
someone came up, it became a little bit easier because this person was a little more outgoing than me, and that helped. So now I still
that's a good
don't
idea.
like doing it, but like anything else, even though I'm not in job search either, I network all the time because it's something you don't want to just do when you're looking for a job. You may do it differently, and I think that is so important to consider. I mean, we're we're all networking, and it's just a not networking is a way of saying having conversations. I think the word gets
Yeah.
pretty much, I don't say overused, but it's just building relationships, having conversations.
And what's great about platforms like LinkedIn is you can start a conversation through DMs or through posts, and then it can help catapult into a real conversation on the phone or on Zoom or in person. So to me, it's a great way to test, great place to test the waters. Another place that I think is a great environment for a sort of more official networking are associations.
Hmm.
And I know that I for one, I joined associations in my field and volunteered. That way at networking events, I had something that kept me busy in case I couldn't find someone to speak with. And it helped give me some confidence when I was in those environments.
I know when I was out in 2008, I actually joined the Chamber of Commerce. It was not a lot of money to join, and I joined as myself as a small business owner, even though I really technically wasn't. But again, they didn't have to know that, and I just was on committees and just built relationships. And it got me out of my introverted shell for the first time because I was talking to people and I had built a relationship with them and we could have conversations. So it's so important to get out there and just and if you're going through job loss, you're going to have your ups and downs, up and down days. It's not all wine and roses, but it's just recognizing that that you're going to have those challenges from time to time. So this is interesting here. A young lady hired by a professional football team for social media skills. This brings up a question about TikTok. I haven't used TikTok at all. I don't think I would. But is that something you might suggest to people that someone use or TikTok or do something on YouTube to kind of get the word out? It's thinking out of your comfort zone. It's doing something different than everyone else.
So to me, it all goes back to the target for if you want to show that you're social media savvy, having a presence on TikTok shows that you understand that platform. So yeah, it's really important. If you are sometimes Instagram might be where your people are, or Twitter it is big for the in the tech space, especially the more of that cutting edge tech space. So think about where your people are and build your presence there. In my view, in addition to LinkedIn, I feel like LinkedIn is sort of industry neutral, but
Yes.
those other ones I would go elsewhere. I mean, I know a lot of people who are in my industry who have a really strong presence on Facebook. So,
I would also say to everyone on the call, do not be afraid to ask us for help or connect with us or connect with others. We do not bite. We are not holier than thou. We are all willing to help and support, but just tell me or tell Virginia what you exactly need help with. Not that you're looking for a job, or just be very specific because the more we know, and this is true for anyone in general, the more we
yeah, no,
know, the
absolutely.
more we can help you specifically, so in whatever way. Because,
No,
you know,
yeah, I
we,
agree. The other thing I'll say about the social media platforms is think about what you're good at. So if you're really good at video, then TikTok might be a better place for you. If you like the text aspects more than LinkedIn or Twitter might be better for you.
and you may want to decide all right, so I'm going to put Chris Dixon's question up. How can you tell where these people are social media wise?
Use searches for think about the words that you would use to search for talent, like you would type them into the social media platforms and see who pops up.
I mean, again, when I'm going to do a search for someone, a search, the LinkedIn profile will show up first because that's the way it's built. But if you want to do a search for them and you add TikTok or Facebook or something to the searching, they will show up that way. And even on LinkedIn, a lot of times people don't realize they can do searches for other keywords. It's not just searching for the job title, it can be searching for something else. I say this sometimes, if you type "we're hiring," "I'm hiring," something like that, you're going to find recruiters there that are hiring. It may not be what you want, but you may build a relationship or be able to share something, based on that. So Dawn actually has this here: intentionally target persons in your industry and leave in-person forum once you've connected with a few power players. No need to stay to the very end, which may be draining for introverts.
I That makes complete sense to me. Don't save your energy. You use your energy to get the most important parts done.
Yeah. I mean, just because an event is 2 hours or 3 hours or an hour does not mean you have to spend that entire time there. I mean, everyone knows what they can and can't do. It's just like some people are morning people, some people are evening people, some people are throughout the day. So it's knowing what your strengths are and
Yeah,
focusing
good point.
that way. So does anyone, I mean, my thoughts going forward, I mean, I also think that the idea that summer is slow, I think most people realize now the jobs are everywhere if you know where to find them, and layoffs are going to happen all the time too. Um, Another piece of advice I give job seekers is do some research, do some, subscribe to a business website or something, or go on to websites that are in your industry to learn about them or something. Because again, I don't know everything, and I learned from getting a hold of other things. Like we have an NJ Biz site here, which sends all the business news to us. So again, it's in your industry. Find out, get on email lists, ask other people for help. Just balance balance it. Being on the computer 40 hours a day is not the answer, for
No,
sure.
exactly, exactly. And people are, to me, conversations yield the best intel that you might not get by reading, because you could talk to people that left companies, people that transition into certain roles, and you can get some juicy scoop that maybe they wouldn't be willing to publish elsewhere.
And from a LinkedIn standpoint, yes, personalize the connection request, so important. But after the connection request, follow up. Thanks for connecting. Continue the conversation. So important. And then from a job seeker perspective, what are your thoughts if someone gets rejected for a job, about following up with them, thanking them for the opportunity, making sure that you're still in front of mind for them? I mean, do you think that's a good
I mean,
practice?
I think it's a great practice to always leave on a super professional note. Tell them that you're really sorry that didn't work, that you were really impressed with what you saw. Uh, we've all heard anecdotally stories of people where the first choice fell through and then they went back to you, or a new opportunity came up. But that leaving with that level of professionalism, it leaves a really good taste in someone's mouth, and they're more likely to remember you going forward. You've Even if you didn't get the job, hopefully you forged a new relationship or a new connection that will carry you no matter where you go or where that person goes.
One thing I wanted to end with, one thing, make sure even though you're in job search, give yourself time off. It's okay to take a vacation. It's okay to take a day off, to kind of regroup. So important. And I would also say to everyone on this call, whether you're listening now or on the recording, go back to this, look at all the people on this call, and you can connect with them. And you've already started, you have that relationship that you're on this call, because that is so important. I mean, that's how engaging comes up. You're on a post, you read the post, engage with people and connect with them. That's how I've met some people, just because we have that thing in
Mhm.
common. So, Virginia, I want to thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. I love seeing your face on my screen. So
Okay. So
this was fun.
have a great day, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the week. Talk soon. Bye.